Hey everybody, welcome to the Fantasy Football Endgame waiver wire advice for wide receivers heading into week 8. That's right. We're basically halfway through the fantasy regular season at the wide receiver position. Not as chaotic as running back, but you know what? You still need some help. There's buys coming up, some major names going to be taking a seat. Let's see who the top options are if you need help at wide receiver. And counting down my top 5, starting with number 5. And I'm going to keep Tim Patrick on the radar here. He's a guy I've kind of been pulling for this year. I'm a huge Jerry Jeudy fan in general, but he just hasn't really gotten it going this year. And, maybe not his fault personally, nothing against the player, but just saying the connection isn't there, need a little more seasoning, whatever the case may be. Tim Patrick has been the leading receiver. And even this week where, the offense kind of did nothing, especially the passing game, technically he was still the leading receiver, 3 catches for 44 yards, not including tight ends, of course, but he's their top target in that sense. And that's been a theme. So, you know what, against a better matchup, he's playable. This coming week is not a great matchup against the Chargers. They're top 10 as far as limiting fantasy points to wide receivers. They have some good cornerbacks there still. So I don't expect a big game from him, but he is kind of like on the wide receiver 4 radar. He's playable in standard leagues, but I really like him going forward because then they get the Falcons in the following week in week 9, and the schedule gets a little bit better. So again, just always keep him in mind. He's not a bad option because he's also a big play threat, as we've seen. Number 4, I'm going to go with Cole Beasley of Buffalo. Now, some of this is partly dependent on John Brown. I know him being out obviously contributed to Beasley's huge game. If you missed it, Beasley, his season best, which was 112 yards on 11 catches. I know it was the Jets, but still, the fact that he was getting all that attention. Stephon Diggs, you might remember, did nothing. Okay, got pretty much shut down. And Gabriel Davis really did nothing. Got 1 catch, thought he might show up, and he didn't. So the fact that Beasley's getting this attention, and I've kind of said that I feel like Josh Allen is regressing, not just statistically, but he's looking a little shaky lately. I think he's going to go a little bit more to his safety blanket in Beasley, given the chance, because it's easier for him when he's running around. He's done a lot more scrambling lately these days too. So just a little sign there. But anyways, Beasley has been solid all year. It wasn't just this one game. It's not an outlier. All right. So this is a guy who's been catching, he's seen at least several targets every game. He's always on the radar. So in your full PPR league, I think you can count on Beasley. And I know this matchup looks terrible against New England in week 8, but you know what? As a slot receiver, he avoids Stephon Gilmore, right? And some of those other cornerbacks like J.C. Jackson, who might clamp down on Diggs, and who knows if Brown's even going to be there. So I still like Beasley going forward, and he's kind of that solid PPR option every week. So keep him there at number 4. Number 2 and 3 kind of go together. Now, you might have heard, especially if you watched Chris talk about the breaking news today, Odell Beckham out for the year. Torn ACL, which is, tough to swallow for all Cleveland fans out there, but you know what? I think they'll be okay. I also mentioned this on the quarterback waiver wire edition, talking about Baker Mayfield. So you want to know my full thoughts on that, check that out. So we have 2 receivers here now who are going to fill the gap, and they already started last week. So Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Which order, basically, are you going to pick these guys? Well, Higgins is the guy who you think is probably going to see the field more often. Obviously, the veteran, he's been there. Probably has a little bit better chemistry, but you know what? I've been big on Peoples-Jones since the draft. He kind of landed in a good spot. Not that we knew Beckham would get hurt, but just not a lot of depth there. He was number 4. Now he's number 3. And you probably didn't even notice that he's been so productive the last 3 weeks. Didn't play the first 3 weeks, but in the last 3 games, 73 yards, 99 yards, and 89 yards. Nobody really even talked about him until now. We're going to talk about him, especially because he had that big touchdown late in the game. So, yeah, grab him. The only thing is his yardage is much bigger than his target share. He's making big plays down the field, more of a field stretcher, not a guy who's going to get peppered with targets. I don't think that's going to change just because of the style of play he has. So better pick and standard than PPR, more of a big play threat, not necessarily a guy who has a high floor, but I definitely like him, and I'd rather shoot for upside as it is. Higgins is a little bit safer, like Higgins too. Both these guys are definitely worth looking at. Only problem is after this week, and it's a decent, not great, not terrible matchup against Las Vegas. They're just kind of right there, mediocre defensively, and this is kind of a mediocre offense, to be honest, in terms of passing offense. But after that, they do get a bye, so you're going to be without these guys following week. So that's the only thing. Beyond that, after week 10, their schedule is really nice. So if you do pick up one or both of these guys, hold them for the long term. Don't look at them as just 1 week, rentals. And number one pick, it has to be Brandon Aiyuk in San Francisco. Deebo Samuel banged up again. Their running backs banged up again. Aiyuk had his best game of the season, went over 100 yards, 115 to be exact. Finally showing some of this explosiveness we knew he had, other than just taking handoffs and running to the house with him. But he's going to be a main target going forward just because, again, injuries, they happen. And Aiyuk has shown that he's kind of developed into one of their top options. So I think that you've got to make him your top choice. But also, if you didn't know this already, Seattle's secondary is not good. And they are still giving up, not surprisingly, the most fantasy points by a pretty good margin to wide receivers. So on paper, you pretty much have to start Aiyuk. And you know what? A little farther down, not in my top 5, I like Kendrick Bourne as a sneaky play this week. So you know what? If you're in a deep league and you're looking for somebody, all these guys are gone, or you want a potential home run play, take a look at Kendrick Bourne. Not a bad option. All right. You always got to play the numbers, got to do what makes sense. All right. Don't forget, do this for running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback. Talk about waiver wire picks up every single week to help you win. That's our end game. All right, guys, if you have more specific questions, hit us up on Twitter at Endgame Fantasy. Of course, hit subscribe and leave us a comment here, and we'll do our very best to get to you. And of course, we answer questions on Endgame Live every Sunday morning. All right, thanks for watching.